let's make no mistake, listeners. We can knock out 10 dope houses in a week. There's 50 more taking their places. We did it more just for the rush and also for completing the task, right? It's a mission. When you go out and you're investigating a house and you're attacking a house, it's to complete the mission. But you look at, when that happened, it kind of woke me up of like, what am I doing? Why am I still doing this type of work? The last door I kicked in was September of 2016 at 3823 Bonneview. I remember kicking that door and two guys behind it, both trying to hold it back. One guy's crawling out the back window, and there's one of them dropped a pistol. There's like a few pounds of weed behind the door, and then there's a bunch of crack and Xanax, and got everything settled. And I remember going to jail, and I was thinking, why am I still doing this? But I knew it's easy for me to say, oh, I'm not going to mess with dope. I'm not going to chase dope anymore. I'll just answer calls. I knew I had to remove myself from the streets if I was going to change. There's always a more efficient way to do anything, right? I hate the phrase, and Steve Claggett said this too. If I had a lighter, I would light it when Steve said this. He hated the old, this is the way we've always done it mentality. Pisses me off when I hear that, because it impedes progress. I don't know. I don't think that way. I always try to look at a certain task or a certain program and see if it's being run the most efficient way. And then how could it be done better? Everything can be done better. You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree. And we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Welcome, ATO listeners. I am amongst some real superheroes here today. Imagine nut-cutting tights and elaborate capes, and the stage is set. Danny Canetti, Mark Bacon, and Randy are hosting today to put Joe King in the hot seat. We have one missing. Shout out to retired Pat Starr in Colorado. Pat, squeeze your ass into some tights. Today, we soak in the satisfaction of making Joe King uncomfortable. And seriously, is that even possible? He has touched each of our careers and lives with his tutelage, wicked intellect, and demented sense of humor. His friendship and meaningful gift of unity reminds us we are a part of something larger than ourselves, and we need that reminder. The founder of this incredible podcast, Joe's foresight, created a platform that bridges divides with a reassuring sense that it's okay to be a human being. Joe King was born and raised here in Dallas. He hired on with DPD in 1997 and remained a slick sleeve by choice his entire career. He grinded out the majority of his career at Southeast with a tattered, well-worn uniform, weathered leather gear, and those top two Class A buttons always open. Now, Joe is the go-to in the legal unit. His experience and leadership in DPD are second to none. Habitual offenders database, detective training, marijuana site release program, RMS, ATO and Dickey's Foundation boards, Angel Armor ballistic protection, just to name a few. Every single one of us sitting here today, and so many of you listeners, have laughed till it hurts, experienced genuine friendship, and are better police officers because of Joe King. Very seldom do we laugh for real. Each one of us can capture those special memories with Joe and are forever thankful. Joe is a comic, superhero, Star Wars nerd. So I took the following line from Batman Begins, since he does own a creepy, full-size replica in his house. Here's the quote. If you make yourself more than a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, then you become something else entirely. Legend. Joe King defines legendary. So before we dive off balls deep into Joe and crank up the heat in his Marvel tights, here is what long-term policing partner had to say about Joe King. Joe is the best partner I've ever worked with. I've been retired for 5 years, and when I look back and think about police work, it's always about Joe and I working together. He is so much more than that, though. He is one of the best people I've been blessed with knowing. He was my best man at Pam and I's wedding. He is one of my best friends. He has the absolute best sense of humor, and most importantly, he has the best heart of anyone I know. I truly love that guy. Thank you, Pat Starr. Each of us, sitting right here, standing in here, can attest to Pat's words. Please welcome. Seize the unique opportunity to get to know Joe King.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
I think I need
Thank you all for tuning in.
I need a major in English so I can say
Yes.
that whole thing. Holy smokes.
From now on, she's doing all openings.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Damn. Wow. Can I get a smoke break now? After that, I can't stand up.
Those tights are cutting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Mark and I are hosting today. Mark's also on the department. Anything you want to share about that, Mark?
Nothing really, just assigned in the narcotics division right now, and I'm glad to be here to talk about Joe and our time together, so I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah, so I think it's good we have 3 people here who know Joe pretty well. So we're just going to start getting into this. Joe, you ready?
Yeah. Bring it on.
Okay, so I knew you grew up in Dallas. Do you grew up in Oak Cliff?
Yep.
Okay. I guess maybe explain to us what Oak Cliff was back then in
Well,
the 80s.
No, well, yeah, I wish. It was the 70s.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was born in 74. Oak Cliff back then, most of my family grew up in West Dallas, around Sylvan and 30 area. And it was close to Kessler Park, and that area wasn't that bad. And then where I lived off Kernwood and Polk, it wasn't bad at all back then. We lived next door to a dentist. It's like within a couple of miles of Carter High School, if people, want to have a reference of that, because Carter's the big school over there. And I went to the elementary from kindergarten to 3rd grade at Bertie Alexander, which is still standing. It's shocking that they haven't, it's probably crawling with asbestos, but it's still there. I was the only white kid in class from kindergarten to 3rd grade. So, and actually we were the only white family that lived in that neighborhood at the time. So growing up, race was never really an issue or never really talked about.
Yeah. So you say we, who's we as your family?
Yeah, it was my mom, Carmen, my dad, my brother, Steven, and my younger brother, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so any interaction with Dallas police even back then as a young boy or?
I didn't really have, I always saw the patch. We've had this iconic patch and badge my whole life, but I remember seeing them, always respecting them. My mom would always use them as a prop to terrify me, to keep me in line. Like, oh, see him over there, he's going to come get you if you don't get your shit straight. But when I was in 6th grade, I had some interactions with Dallas police. My cousin and I were playing baseball out in the street, and a squad car came down, and they started doing like a play-by-play over the intercom, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And I was like, damn, I would like to do that. And early on, I knew I wanted to be a cop. My Uncle Pete was a Cockrell Hill cop, and I always looked up to him, and the uniform just looked so smooth, and I don't know, I always wanted to work in Dallas. But Oak Cliff at the time, it was not bad. I worked at South Central before I went to legal, and Oak Cliff now, every other house on the
drastically changed.
It's like a drug house. Yeah, that neighborhood's just ravaged.
Yeah. Mark told me something that I'd forgotten about. I knew it. You had mentioned it back in the past, but Mark, you were mentioning something about an accident he had been through when he was younger.
Yeah, so you told me a long time ago about an accident you had, and been over to your house a few times and saw the cast that you still have from that.
Yeah.
Can you
I
kind of
remember the
describe
cast.
that?
Yeah, well, I lived at 1317 Kernwood. It was over there off Kernwood and Polk, and I was out front of the house playing with. I was 4 years old, almost 5, and I was out playing with a bunch of friends, and I was using. I had a remote control Star Wars land speeder, right? It went across the street. I went to go get it. My other friends were on the other side of the street. I was crossing the street again. I got ran over by a car. Broke my femur, knocked me several feet down, rolling down Kernwood. And then broke my femur. I had some other injuries, and I was in traction for a good amount of time. I had my 5th birthday in the hospital. I got a bunch of pictures of that. But I got showered with gifts from everybody. So my first cast, when I left, all the doctors and all the visitors signed it. And I don't know how I kept it all this time. There's still like a C-3PO and Luke Skywalker drawing I did in crayon on it. It's kind of half-assed looking, but it's still there. But so I took that with me, and then when I got discharged from the hospital, I had like a half body cast. So like it was like up to the waist, crotchless, of course, and then halfway up the good leg was cast, and then the bad leg was fully cast. And I kind of just had to crawl around the house with that damn thing, and then be put in chairs and stuff to eat. But yeah, I of all the things that I've kept over the years, that cast kind of is a reminder.
What about the Land Cruiser or Land Speeder?
No, it's gone. I wish I still had it. I'd probably sell it on eBay.
So you're saying 4 years old and you're chasing a Land Speeder across the street. So
Yeah.
So the Star Wars comic book thing started already at 4 years old.
Oh, yeah. No, Star Wars. I mean, I saw the original Star Wars because they kept re-releasing it. I saw it. I can't tell you how many times up there at that theater by Redbird Mall. They had United Artists that opened up, and then they had an old, I can't remember if it's Cinemark or what, but we would go to that all the time. My older brother and I would go to the movies. That was our escape. And I mean, I saw the original Halloween, which came out in 78, and I was 4 years old. There was no ratings back then. Parents didn't give a shit. They just get him out of our hair, take him to the movies. I saw the original Halloween and Friday the 13th at the
Walked
theater.
there by yourself or with your
My
brother?
brother, yeah. We walked up the street.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for listeners who don't know, Joe's a huge comic book buff. Like any history all the way back to the 60s and 70s with these comic books and thorough storylines and the offshoot storylines, Joe knows. And he actually has a giant room. Do you still have it?
No, I did.
Our giant
it's
room
packed
of,
away.
I guess you'd say comic book paraphernalia and some movie paraphernalia.
Junk, basically. Yeah.
And Missy said a life-size mannequin.
Yeah, it's a life-size Batman that 6 foot, and it's got the Michael Keaton costume on it, and yeah, gotten a lot of use out of that.
Right.
Just kidding.
So at some point you moved to Quinlan, did you not?
Yeah. So my dad died when I was 12. Mom died when I was 15. But after Dad died, we moved out to Quinlan, which growing up in Dallas was a huge culture shock, going from a big city to a rinky-dink small town. But I liked it, though. I liked the small town feel. I moved out there. It was weird. The whole 7th grade and 8th grade, I did half the school year in 7th grade in Dallas schools, and I went to Quinlan to finish it off. Then I came back to Dallas for half of 8th grade, and then back to Quinlan. There was a lot of bouncing around. Then I did half a year at Sunset High School, which is at the time was one of the most gang-ridden high schools in Dallas, and it probably still is. They were the first to get metal detectors. I know that when I was a freshman there. And then I moved out to Quinlan, and I just graduated from Quinlan.
So 12 and 15, you lose your parents. What happened to your parents?
Both of them got cancer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when your brothers, they moved to Quinlan with you?
My older brother, Steve, he was already graduated at the time. I think he was only like 19. Oh, no, he's 10 years older than me, or he was 10 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah, my younger brother moved out there too.
All right. I have to tell you a story.
Okay.
This was many years ago. I think we were both on the team together, new, maybe 2010, and I was working an extra job, and some lady came up to me and said, "Hey, do you know Joe King? He's my cousin." I'm like, "Yeah, I actually work with him." And we start talking. So I always wondered about Paul being your half brother, and so I kind of asked about, what. I haven't pried into Joe's life yet, but what's the deal with, where's the rest of his family, or how did he become into Paul's family? And all she could say is, "You got to ask Joe."
Yeah. So Paul Smith, he's a DPS intelligence lieutenant, and he and I played high school football together at Quinlan. And when my mom passed away, I was kind of in between of where I was going to live. I was going to maybe have to move back to Dallas, which I really didn't want to do because I had so many friends and I was doing well in sports, and actually for once doing well in school. I ended up moving in with, I was telling basically everybody, hey, I may have to move. Paul went to talk to his parents, and I didn't know them at all. I just knew Paul. Never met them. They agreed to take me in. So when I was 15, they kind of took me in.
Yeah.
So he's people go, well, is he your older brother or younger brother? I'm like, well, we're the same age. And they're like, what? Yeah, don't just long story.
Yeah, and that's the
Don't
only
ask.
family of yours I've met is Paul, and
Yeah.
as far as I know, that's your brother. And
Yeah,
For
Paul
those-
and I are pretty close.
yeah, for those who don't know, his brother Paul is with DPS, Department
Mm-hmm.
of Public Safety for Texas. So, two guys in law enforcement.
Yeah, he applied for DPS like 4 or 5 times and wouldn't get a call back, and then he got hired by Dallas actually, and they agreed to take him, but then DPS called, and he always wanted to go to become a trooper, so he went ahead and go to DPS. I think it worked out for him pretty well.
So, who made law enforcement first, you or him?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that I've got maybe a year and a half on him.
And
I
what
think.
year? What year was that?
I heard on with DPD, and the academy started in January of '97, and that's when I met our buddy Randy here. So, but I'd been hired. I was working at Terrell State Hospital, mental hospital, for a couple of years before I got hired on with DPD, and I remember taking like a month off, and I can't remember if they had pushed our class back a little bit. I was anticipating it to start sooner, and I wanted a kind of a month off to reset, and I think they pushed it back. Then I started running out of money because I was poor back then. Mm-hmm. So I started in January '97.
What led you then to want to apply to Dallas Police?
Well, growing up in Dallas, I always wanted to be a Dallas cop. And I remember even in high school watching that movie JFK, and part of the Warren Commission, they had a Dallas officer up testifying, and I remember them talking about Dallas's finest. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing on the collar those DPD pins and how just freaking cool they were, and that iconic patch. And just always seeing them in Dallas and seeing them as a source of people to help. I kind of looked at them in some ways like superheroes, I guess.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I was going to be a cop, I wanted to apply for Dallas. And this is the only department I applied for.
Mm-hmm. So, 97, you get in the academy. Probably quite a bit different academy than we had in the early 2000s even. What was it like?
It's 8.5 months.
Yes.
And no, it was fun. I mean, Randy and I we gravitated towards each other because we were both pranksters and just goofballs and just doing dumb shit. And most of the stuff that I did was behind the scene pranks. Like,
No one would know it was you?
yeah, like I would do stuff like in between lunch and the lunch break, I would go right on the dry erase board, bring your reflective vest to class. And so I would sit there and watch everybody milling in with carrying their reflective vests, and I would just be smiling. Nobody knew where it came from. They just assumed an instructor did it, or it was just I got Salinas' locker combination and terrorized him through the whole 6-22-8 is still his
Nothing's
his combination.
changed. I think we've all been victims of some kind of prank.
Was this back when it was still at Bachman Lake?
No. It was
moved
still
out
in
to-
it's still in the Redbird Lane.
So who are your class advisor or coordinator?
Class coordinator was Senior Corporal Rick Bettis, and he's kind of a legend on the department. He's got Medal of Valor. He's God, he was so good, and he really helped set a tone for our class of somebody we wanted to be like. Just the way he spoke, the way he interacted with folks, and just he was actually sent out to the academy to recover from injuries of getting shot in the stomach and during a family violence call, and he still dragged a lady away from gunfire back then. And just hearing somebody like that, it was just like, damn, I want to be that guy. And just how eloquent he was. He was so personable and so intelligent and eloquent, and also a genuine badass. We always wanted to be like him. Then we had Corporal Easley. Was it Robert?
It was Roger Easley.
Roger
He was
Easley.
our class advisor. Our other class coordinator was Misty Cootie.
Misty Cootie, yes.
And she's getting ready to retire.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, but Misty was brand new. I think she was brand new out there and not quite used to, dealing with. She was real quiet, but she took a lot of keys off of Rick.
So she was new out there, and you took full advantage of that and probably
No,
pranked the hell out of her.
I did not. I didn't prank her.
Made her
I
look
was legitimately scared of the staff. I thought that they were gonna, especially. And plus, I didn't want to do anything to embarrass Rick. I mean, I didn't care about embarrassing my classmates or embarrassing myself. I didn't give a shit. But, Rainey and I, we became friends pretty quick. And Scott McDonald, Chris Webb, Salinas, and Michelle Kinley sit next to me, and I terrorized her pretty much the whole academy. Yeah, she probably hates me.
So in the academy, right before you graduate, the instructors come in and they usually give you a list that you write down of the stations you want to go to in order of preference. And some guys get the stations they want and lots don't, and they get shipped to wherever. But you rank them in order, first, second, third, or whatever. What was your first pick for a station?
My first pick, it almost pains me to say,
North Central.
was Southwest.
Oh, well.
And Southeast was my second. But Southwest only because I grew up there and I knew the geography. And I knew Keast, I knew Hampton. I mean, I knew somewhat that area. And Southeast, I wanted to go there because I lived at the time on the east side of the Metroplex, so that logistically would have been the best place. And it ended up being, I am honored to go to the greatest division in the city.
Amen.
That's right.
Amen. Yeah. So, 1997, end of 97.
Yeah.
Southeast. I'm assuming you hit the ground running. I'm assuming there's a bunch of cohorts running around with you, wrecking it up like you guys used to do.
Yeah. Well, when I got on, there was, my trainers my trainers weren't really proactive, but I didn't know any better at the time.
Sure.
Right. And then I got on Little T, and I partnered up with John Valdez like a week into Little T. And Little T is you have to arrive with like a senior officer for X amount of weeks. I can't remember. It's been so damn long. I can't remember. I've been 25
It
years
was like
ago.
3 months now.
Some such. Yeah.
But 3 months you have to ride with a partner after training, and it's kind of like a probationary period.
Yeah.
How long had John been on at that time?
Oh hell, I'm 7'4", he's 7'2", 9'8",
Right.
not long at all.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe.
a lot of us that have come through is the same thing. When they say senior officer, you're talking about somebody that's been here 6 months longer.
Because real senior officers don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
No.
So you're riding around with someone else who's just as gung-ho as you.
Well, before I partnered up with John, I rode with a couple, like 2 or 3 senior officers, and Paul Hinton was one of them. He was just angry, he I don't think he cared that I was in the car with him.
No.
And didn't want me to be there, and I never got to drive. Whatever. That's fine. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I get with John, and we have some pretty good dope arrests right off the bat. And John was like, "Hey, we work pretty well together. Do you want to partner up?" I was like, "Hell yeah, this is fun." We started messing with some dope houses on Stella, there off of Corinth, and that's the first drug arrest I ever had was off of 1423 Stella, and John and I partnered up, and then at the same time there was a group of senior officers, kind of led by Klingel Smith, Mark Terry, Del Ball, and Eric Knight, and I'm forgetting some people, but they were kind of doing a very aggressive, proactive style policing in Southeast, and that's who I learned from. So Mata was also in, I think he's John's class, so he's 7,300, and we all learned from them guys. Mata was riding with Joe Moran, and I was riding with John, and then Pat Starr was a class ahead of me. He was riding with Menchaca. So we all started learning from these older guys, and that doesn't exist anymore. Like having a group of older veteran officers. Now you have pretty much rookies teaching rookies. But I was so fortunate to get in with a group of guys, and you know, like Misty said in her episode, chasing dope. that was the funnest thing I've ever done in my career. I did it too long.
Got a question for you about that. So, for those that don't know, a unique thing about working in a city this large is when you get into this line of work, you can kind of make it what you want it. Some people like to do traffic stuff. Some people like to do nothing but answering calls, going to robbery, thing like that. What made you kind of gravitate towards chasing drugs and their narcotics in the city of Dallas?
And if you can go further and explain for some listeners who may not understand, what proactive policing when you say that?
Okay, there's kind of two types of policing. There's proactive and there's reactive, you know, and going call to call, that's more reactive. You're responding after a call is put in by a citizen, usually after a crime has already been committed. Okay. Proactive is going out in the hot spots of high crime areas in the city. In the southeast, you could just throw a rock up randomly and hit a hot spot, a crime-ridden neighborhood, and go out and look for the people that are daily out there terrorizing those neighborhoods. They have guns, they have drugs, and pretty much every crime in Dallas, all the way up to homicide, is usually there's a nexus that's connected to drugs in some way. I gravitated towards that because it was fun. There was a lot of physicality to that job. Like Misty talked about, getting out in the car on a dead sprint, hopping fences, getting in foot chases, damn near wrestling people every other day.
Yep.
And I used to be pretty fast, and I enjoyed getting into foot chases. There towards the end, hell, I would hurt for 2 weeks if I ran 20 yards after somebody. But it felt I was making more of a difference. And I, you know, in that community of actually getting bad guys off the streets, as opposed to waiting to let them do something and then go and clean up the mess, right? And it was just a lot of fun. And I worked with a good group of people that, you know, Misty and, you know, Scott and Roger Rudloff and Mata. I mean, all those guys, we worked. So, and Greg Garcia, he's here. He's with us today, sitting here mean mugging me. And Spencer Barons was his partner. He left, went back to Nebraska. We had such a good time, and we had such a tight-knit group that we literally would – it was fun. It was like a game, you know, like just a cat and mouse game. Like we would literally at nighttime sneak up on our stomachs, crawling through high weeds and into bushes and doing surveillance on a back door of a dope house that literally was like 10 or 15 yards away.
Yeah, or sneaking in a vacant house next door and watching.
Oh, that happened a lot, yeah. I mean, actually, I had a ride-along a buddy from high school, Alan Mason. Shout out Alan. We were in the backyard of a dope house doing surveillance on a house for Scott Bricker and Pat. And the guy, we didn't realize that the house had surveillance cameras on it, right? And this is back before DVR and all that shit. And he wasn't recording nothing. He was just watching. And the quality was probably grainy back then. Well, he saw somebody lurking around the vacant house next to his dope house, and he came out in the backyard and fired a shot at us over there at the vacant house. And they had to like, shit, come up, y'all come up, you know. Then they come up, and he throws the gun into the bushes, and then it runs back up in the house, and then you know, then it was on.
After that,
it unfolds, yeah. But Alan,
that's a good
you know,
word.
and then Alan, to this day, tells a story about people. You would think it was like the Matrix, like this bullet went just by our head, and he's fucking back bending, getting out of the way. But it wasn't that close. But it was funny. It's a funny story.
So even when I came on as a rookie, you were pointed out as the go-to guy to go for advice on chasing dope. And that's your reputation and your character, as I think most people knew in Southeast. Besides the chasing dope stuff, any critical incidents or big moments at Southeast?
Yeah, I could talk about chasing dope all day, and I've literally, everybody at this table I've got a story with, you know, about chasing dope. And I remember Misty and I got in a long-ass foot chase several blocks over there off Illinois and Corinth from that 7-Eleven, and, you know, But there's one thing that I really haven't talked about. I mean, there's a few, but I'm trying to get away from the dope chasing stories because they're all crazy stories in themselves, and we'll get into more of those when you and I work together. Hal Baird, I believe he had been on 10 or 11 years, and he was training Mike Jones, and I think I had only been on a couple years. Misty, you were brand new,
brand new.
Yeah. So he and his rookie Mike Jones were going code to cover some officers down Pennsylvania, and a car pulled out on Pennsylvania and clipped their squad car. They lost control, and then the squad car hit a pole there. And actually, to this day, there's like a plaque up high up on the pole there for Hal Baird. Hal was taken to Baylor, and when Misty and I got on that day, he was still alive. Misty, I don't know if you probably don't remember this, but me, you, and Amy Ginger actually went to Good Eats that day and had dinner, and then we were talking about it, and we were getting updates. We thought he was going to survive, but he didn't. He didn't make it. And one thing I like to do this podcast is talk about the history of the fallen, to give like a backstory, so they're just not another portrait on the wall. People get some kind of story. Well, this is my story. So I get back to Southeast, and as I walk in, we start getting news that he had passed away. And Sergeant Brown, Sergeant Brown, he worked a station. He was a station sergeant for a long time.
Renaissance Man.
Yeah, Renaissance
You like to
Man.
go to the Renaissance Festivals?
Yeah, the Scarborough Fair.
Yeah,
Festival.
there you go.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, come with me as soon as I walk in. And I hadn't been on that long, but he knew me just from seeing me around the station. So I go into the conference room, and he's got a paper bag in there, several paper bags, and he pulls out this very tattered DPD Class A uniform. Okay. And he lays it out on the table. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, holy shit, that's Hal's uniform. And you could just see there was blood on the collar on the right side because Hal had some head injuries. And it looked like and I remember there was a rip there was cuts up the sleeve, right? And it's because they cut off his uniform. He had the pants too. He had the vest. The vest was in there, and they basically they transported him, and they got all that back, I guess, from Baylor or Parkland, where the hell he went. But we went through. We had to go through the pockets on, like the pockets. I remember them pulling out the whip out book. It had blood on it, and the blood the uniform was stiff. Class A's are pretty stiff anyway, but dried blood, it was real stiff. And I just remember looking at this damn uniform, same one I was wearing, because back then we all wore Class A's. We didn't have these Class B
Class B's,
pajamas,
Class C's,
yeah,
or whatever you want to wear.
Whatever, yeah, we're close to blue jeans with a Class A shirt nowadays. But I remember looking at this damn uniform, going, "Fuck, this is the same uniform I'm wearing, and it's beat to hell." And he died in that, while wearing that uniform. So that, then we went through all that, and I remember Reggie Jackson. It was this Sergeant Brown and I standing in that damn conference room. It's a little tiny conference room, no bigger than this one at Southeast, probably smaller. Reggie Jackson walks in, sees me, and he sees what we're doing. He's like, nope. He does like a about face and walks the hell out. He didn't want no part of that either. I did not want a part of that either. But, Sergeant told me to go in there and help him. So we're going through it. He gives me a locker combination and gives me Hal's locker, his locker number. He told me, he said, get a box and go in there and get everything out of there. Get everything out of his locker. And, so I had to go through and go through Hal's locker and take everything out. And there was quite a bit of stuff in there. A lot of copies of DORs. I mean, just a lot of stuff. I just remember thinking afterwards, I was going, man, it just really was the first time I thought about how finite this life is, especially how life of an officer can turn on a dime so quickly, So that was my first taste because, the guys I was working with, we were fearless. We would do stupid shit.
Having
we would
fun.
jump into windows and kick in doors and rip off bars with our bare hands. Greg, you know that. Mark, we've all, Danny, Misty, Randy, we've all done it, right? But that early on in my career, I'll never forget that. Just looking at that damn Class A uniform and looking at that collar with the same DPD pins that I was talking about earlier, and it was blood soaked. It was a very surreal, very sad experience.
And it's interesting how what events hit people in a certain way. I mean, a lot of us been through really traumatic things, and we just brush it off and keep going, no big deal. Or we've seen some really horrific things, but then there's just something sometimes in an event that just triggers you in a different way. And I think usually it's the humanity of the situation. And
a turning point too. I mean, of a thought process. And yes, I continued doing crazy and reckless and dangerous shit after that, but that stuck with me. Another say critical incident. It was this. I don't know if it was necessarily a critical incident or just a shitty experience. The first time I had seen John and I entered a call out in the Grove, and I think it come out as a cutting, I don't know, a shooting, or it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was a code 3 call. We get out there, and basically a lady, it was a mother, she ended up dipping a few-month-old baby into a boiling water, okay? And DFR was already, they were working on the baby. And they transported baby, ended up dying, but I just remember this, they were trying, the fatty part of the baby's legs, the upper thighs, just the real chubby muscle, they were trying to hold it together because the baby's meat was
flying off.
It was falling off like a off a bone. And this is 20-something-year-old me, and and thank God I didn't have kids at the time, because it probably would have affected me a lot more than it did them. Yeah. But that image still sticks with me of how just gray the baby's flesh was. And John and I transported her to Capers and did their thing, and she ended up being charged. I think she ended up going to a mental hospital though. I don't think she did any prison time for that. So that one really sticks with me, and it sticks with me now because I have a child.
Yes.
So
yes, I think all officers can attest to that anything dealing with kids is rough, and especially if you have kids or you're a family man, it just hits you even more so. Yeah. Dope chasing, having fun all these years at Southeast. You got injured pretty seriously, didn't you? Enough that you had a surgery, or? Yeah,
well, I remember Scott McDonald and I were chasing a guy off lead 2800 Ledbetter, and I jumped a guardrail and broke my ankle. I came back, and the first X-ray didn't realize that they didn't show the fractured ankle when I ain't coming back. And back then, you just did not want to miss a day of work. You did not want to take a day off, even if you were off. You had your buddies like Greg or Scott or somebody calling and saying, "Hey, we got in the house over on Lamont." Fuck, missed it. Never mind the fact there's 100 more dope houses in that same area that you could get into.
This one was the one.
Yeah, I was pissed off that I missed something. But so I get back to work early, and the ankle just never healed. It just kept, after every shift, I'd pull my sock down, it'd be swollen, around where the sock was, just puffy. And then finally, Sergeant Cato at the time, he said, "You can go back and get that re-x-ray." So I go back and get it re-x-rayed, and it was broken. So I worked on it several months after it initially got broken, and by then it had broken away some cartilage and part of the bone. And then over the next few months of working, still getting in, hobbling through foot chases, and it basically had broken up into several chips. So I had to have surgery on that. That was my first one. And then Pat and I got into a car wreck, going after a stolen car, and I ruptured 2 discs in my neck. And I was off for a very long time. And then the thing is, the week that I got back to work, I had to go through a week-long updater class for core, or whatever it was called back then, Bridges of the Past or some shit. But, yeah, that's what they call it. That's what they called core back then. So the last day of core, jacking around in the DT room, I blow out my patellar tendon, and I'm off again. so that time, all that time off, at first it was relaxing. I'm rehabbing. And I've had a 2-level neck fusion. I had C5, C6, C6, C7 fused, but then that patellar tendon, and that actually wasn't. It was a bad surgery, but not like the knee. When you're having to get around on crutches for several months and immobilized thigh high brace, it was a beating. And especially after being off work all that time, I was depressed. I mean, I was. Everything was a chore to do, right? And I was ready to get back to work. Just because I want to do something different. My mindset of work was really rusty, right? And then I get back to work and Greg's Narcotics. Mata's I don't remember, Academy maybe, or maybe Mata was at Northeast or Central at the time.
That's what I remember. I remember I was at Southeast and there was a stint where you just disappeared.
Yeah.
For a long time. And then when you came back, I think Pat had actually come back to Southeast.
Well, Pat, not initially.
Okay.
Pat was still at Northwest in deployment initially.
He came back briefly.
He came back briefly, yeah.
And I remember seeing you two, and you were riding together, and I thought, oh, holy hell, it's getting wrecked. And I remember one day, Pat just told me, like, yeah, we got like 26 guns off the street this month. And I'm like, 26 guns off the street? Where do you even find these things? Where are these at? How are you getting 26 guns?
We knew what rock to look under.
Yeah. There was that period where you disappeared, you came back from the injuries, and then I remember that too. Like, your peers or colleagues were gone at Southeast, and you're the old head now with the experience. You're in the position that Troy Klingel-Smith used to be for you and everything else.
Yeah, I was experienced, but my mind was rusty. I wasn't sharp. I did not see. I remember when I first got back, and I brought it up in Misty's. I think your mind is like a muscle. You have to work. Right. If not, it gets complacent. It gets, it gets out of shape. My mind, I would not see things like I did before, prior to going off of all that time, like a year and a half, and binge watching 24 and Sopranos and shit like that. I mean, your mind kind of gets very lazy and lax. And I remember I got back and there was only one person that was still there from the old crew. And he was working with a band of young officers, like Emerson, Rowden, Martin, and Began. I didn't know these guys. I was like, oh shit, I trust him, but I don't know these jokers. And my guys are gone. And at that point in my career, I was like, I literally, and I don't think I've even told many people this. At the time, I was living up in the North Central area in Dallas. I had brokered a deal to go to North Central. They was going to switch body for body.
Traitor.
Yes, but didn't do it.
Thank God.
I literally was like on the list. They were going to trade body for body, and somebody was going to come to Southeast. I was going to go to North Central because I just mentally I wasn't into that type of job anymore. My friends are gone, the people I trust, and you all know you have to really trust a person that you're working with doing that type of aggressive policing. But this one friend just kept dragging me off the couch and getting out there. And I remember I would go home at night and I would feel like that I had taken a Benadryl just because I was so freaking tired, because the mental activity was so much more than I had been used to being off of those injuries, and the critical thinking, you have to think.
And elevated stress levels. You don't
elevated
realize we
stress
live with those all the time, and we
Yeah.
just don't even realize they're elevated.
No, hell no. And just nonstop going from dope house to dope house to dope house. So I credit him getting me in with these other young guys, and then at that point, I kind of started showing them, like what we used to do, right? And then I just kind of went on from there, and then I was working on evenings, and basically we're still on patrol, but we would all kind of band together the same way we did, Greg. With there was a 3080s, but it was big, right? We'd be in patrol, and we'd ride the hell out of calls and go chase dope, and go on and hit some houses, right? And that's what we did. And then in 2010. They had this Operation Hornet's Nest going on. It was it was just a cool name for a
I forgot that's what the name of it was.
Operation Hornet's Nest. Yeah. And they had these things called crime response teams at every substation, and it was on days. It was days and weekends off. And at the time, I was working Edmonds, and I really didn't care to work on days because I didn't want to get up early. I never had a day job. Ever. So I liked Sergeant Robert Grant. He was over the unit, but I didn't know anybody on the team. And then again, I'm old school, and my trust. I did not know I didn't trust any of those guys. Dan, you were there. I'd heard of you, but I didn't know you, and I didn't know Helen Guard or Travis French or and then there was some folks that you just couldn't count on, But I started working with you guys, and I don't know if you remember early on, I would still get Chris Whites and some other people that I would work on evenings to come and help us do things, and because I just didn't know y'all. It wasn't, and then I started work, and I started seeing real quick that not everybody worked as a cohesive team, and I really felt the need doing that type of work to bring that cohesive team setting to that team like we used to have. But policing had changed a lot too from that old style policing to when the CRT was going on.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, that team needed some kind of guidance or leadership. I remember Sergeant Robert Grant coming to me. I was on the team before you by a couple months, maybe like 4 or 5 months.
It was like 6 months it was going, yeah.
And at some point he had come to me and did his little kind of behind the scenes talk like, hey, I'm thinking about trying to get Joe King on this team. And I was, yes, do it. We need someone here who's had some experience doing this kind of work that can help us because a bunch of new guys just run around trying to figure this out. So I was really excited when you came on. And I think you filling us out was the same as a lot of the guys on the team trying to fill you out. They were kind of hesitant, wondering if you were going to come in and wreck shop and just be condescending to us or not really help us out or, take over. Or
Well, I'll ask you a question. Did I wreck shop or was I
no,
condescending?
Not at all.
Okay. I was just curious of how it came across because I can be.
Wreck shop, no, not at all. There was a lot of
condescending,
guys.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to know what someone else had to say about you?
Oh,
I would.
Yeah?
yeah.
Because you rode with Angie, right? Angie Fox. Shout out to Washington State.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yes.
Oh,
What
wow.
does
Oh,
Angie
goodness.
have to say about Joe King?
You still keep in contact with her, huh?
Wow.
Joe King is the hardest working police officer I've ever known. He is also one of the smartest people to ever wear the uniform. Joe is not only an amazing officer, but he is the best friend that anyone could ask for. I will forever be grateful for his mentorship throughout my career. He's simply the best.
Wow.
Thanks, Angie.
I'll put a check in the mail to her by the weekend.
I remember all those afternoons, me, you, and Angie in the gym working out, man. I mean, those
Yeah.
were good times.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah,
that was
it
our
was,
bitch.
really
that was our
was.
bitch session.
Yeah, it
and
really
getting out
was.
frustrations.
Yes, it was. And Angie, man, I miss her.
Oh, I love Angie. Oh, thank you, Angie. That was very sweet.
Yeah, so obviously you rescued me off of Deep Nights when I came to CRT. We actually met in the gym for the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that or not.
Fill me in.
Well, I was working an extra job. I was on Deep Night CRT, and I got there a little early to work out, and you and Angie were in the gym. That's where we met. And I obviously had heard about you, like they talk about. Your reputation preceded you. And so I knew who you were, and we struck up a conversation, and then next thing you know, I'm on day CRT with you. And then me and you were working out all the time
Yeah.
together. But that was nothing that was new for you. You weightlift. You were into weightlifting, and you have remained into weightlifting. Why is that so important to you as your go-to for health?
Well, thank God I got into a habit of lifting weights back when I was 15, in high school, and that's my stress relief, and Misty and I used to kill it in the gym at Southeast. Scott McDonald and I used to work out every day. It was almost like we did it like we were getting paid to do it. And I think that helps with the team camaraderie and also just staying, because it's a very physical job, and it's easy to let yourself go in this job. You see a lot of officers that are out of shape and they got bad lower back. I got a bad lower back, but I think that being in good shape has probably helped prolong my career. From 97 to to 16 out doing a physical job. It wasn't easy there at the end, but I think that staying in shape really was important. But I enjoyed working out. God, I think it helped with the, just the team atmosphere. And you and Angie used to go in there. Just God, we'd kill it. We wouldn't be able to hardly drive home.
No, I remember many times sitting there with a trash can between my legs, debating on if I was going to throw up or not, because he was pushing me so hard.
Doing those drop sets on squats.
Oh my goodness! And you're right. And then barely being able to walk the next day. I'd tell, if me and you weren't riding together, sometimes I'd be riding with Robin Rivera, and I'd tell Robin and be like, "Hey, I'll drive. That's all I can do right now because I can't get out of the car. I don't know what to tell you."
Well, I remember you texting me saying you were driving home and your like chest muscle just locked up on you, like where you went to take it, you turn and your chest just locked up. And I just like working out with my friend. I mean, and especially people that are like minded that love to work out. Randy and I we work out recently together, and it was just fun. It's just fun to. It's almost like a therapy session, physically and mentally, because you can actually sit and you can go through the day and talk about how the day went, what we could have done, and then also just keeping your body just mentally, because we have a lot of little minor injuries in this job, but just keeping it at peak performance.
Speaking of the therapy of the working out, that's where I know I might be ahead of schedule on this. That's probably where a lot of the discussion on this podcast started. Was out there at Rockwall, the fitness
Legends Fit, yep.
Legends Fitness out there in Rockwall. When you started to want to do it, and then you didn't want to do it, and then we got here. I don't know if I'm ahead of schedule on that.
That's right. Yeah,
but that's where a lot of this started when we got here because you were working out. We were working out together, and
it's therapy session. And you and I, there was, and I'll get into the why of the podcast. But that was our therapy session, and and you and I have been friends for more than half my life, right? And I could talk to you candidly about anything, and some thoughts about starting this podcast and just anything really, just career, just career moves, relationship moves, everything we talked about, and we also were kicking each other's ass in the gym. So it's a physical and mental exercise, I think. I mean, Misty. I remember Misty. She was before she got into SWAT and became badass over there. We would just go in there and just beat the hell out of each other. It was fun.
That Southeast weight room has its own personality.
Yeah.
Remember the deep night sergeants when they would get in there with the hairband music and just the cigars?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And do a couple of reps to just get a pump and then take off.
Speaking of therapy, I remember sitting in detail, and everybody's so serious and quiet, and I would be looking around, and there's the same pictures hung in the detail room. They're probably still there today. The same fake plant with dust collecting on it, and I look closely, and there's some weird stuffed animal peeking out of the fake plant, or there's some weird piece of art of dogs playing poker hanging
I think
on
the dogs play poker might still be there.
Yeah.
And I'm like joking.
Yeah. Well, so that detail room, you're right. It is like in a movie style depot. You have a few sergeants set up in an elevated position up top, the higher authorities, and then they have a bunch of tables in front for roll call. And I found like an old oil painting, like a country scenery. It was a good sized painting. It was the size of probably almost like a 45-inch TV. It was a big oil painting, and I just hung it up on the back where the sergeant sat, and it sat there. I mean, 8 years. I mean, it just stayed there. It just sat there, and they probably like, well, it doesn't really fit in here, but it is kind of pretty. We don't know who put it up, but we'll leave it.
Just no one has ownership of the place to even decide that that shouldn't be here. It's just
the dogs playing poker lasted maybe 3 months before somebody took it down. But yeah, I would also like to, while we were in detail, I would look around the room, and I would block my number, and I would start calling people's phones to see who had their ringer on to be an asshole to make their phone ring.
And there was a certain person you would get every single time.
Yeah, hey, and he's retired now. Shit, I'll go ahead and say, Lieutenant Hart, that was me. That I always would block my number and call you, and you would never have your ringer off. And I remember one time you got up and went out in the hallway and answered it, and of course I hung up, and you came back in, And Sergeant Paul Morris goes, well, who is it? He goes, I know who it is. It's downtown. Oh, of course. It's president. They're calling. It can't be just a lowly PO in the back cracking himself up.
Something good.
Yeah, it had to be somebody real important. But yeah, I like to do bits. Yeah.
Bits.
Yeah. It's
Yep.
fun.
I think this is probably the same for Mark, but this is like my memory and picture of you is working on that team, working hard, having fun, and then all the laughing and the jokes and the pranking, and then the weightlifting in the room. If I had to pick three things that I thought of Joe King, it would be working hard as a police officer, having fun making jokes, and having a good time working out. I think for some of the others in the command staff, they had a different view of you, a good one, but it was you were known with a lot of the higher ups as being the go-to guy to go for an honest answer and a good explanation on things in the department. Or if there is a little pet project that needed to be done, they went to you to figure out how could we do this? How do we implement this? What do you think about it? I don't know if there's officers out there that remember the TABS program you started, which was basically keeping track of the burglars like a hookbook across the board through all the divisions, knowing that a lot of these burglars drove crime high.
Right.
There's some other programs you're involved with. You were an RBT instructor for some years too, helping with the RBT program. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, besides the goofing off and working at our level, working up with the higher ups and your relationships you've had with people who wear brass.
Yeah, I've had a really weird, unique relationship with command staff, but also there was a time where I did not have a good, I didn't have a good rep with certain command staff, but I knew that if I, because everybody's looked at as the old dirty dope chaser, they're gonna, you're gonna go to the federal pen, and I can't tell you how many times I heard that, and when I was on the streets and called Greg up for a warrant, he's like, oh shit, what are they gonna come out here? Anyway, so TABS is targeting against burglary suspects. I know command likes cute acronyms and
Military and police got to have an acronym.
Yeah, we have to. So it basically what I did is I came up with a list of habitual burglars within Southeast, and I broke it down into divisions they're arrested in, and also I put bolos on every single one of them. That way, if any of them had a warrant out, or anybody.
If they got ran.
Yeah, if they got ran anywhere in the city, it would pop up, known burglar at Southeast, contact Joe King via email with new info. So I was getting emails from officers across the city saying, hey, I pulled him over in this red Grand Marquis with so-and-so. Oh, shit, he's one of our burglars too. Oh, he's one of our targeted dope dealers. So I was getting fresh intel, and also I had them in TDEX at the time. I think it's Index now. But I had everybody on TDEX watch list, so I would get an email every time they were arrested or when they were released from jail. I would get an email just to kind of keep constant, basically, tabs on them, really. And I ended up making one for drug dealers. That's what I really wanted to do. So I kind of finagled it where I did one for burglars, and the command staff's like, oh, hell yeah, this is great. And Chief Brown actually made everybody in every division in the city create one. Of course, that always put people at each division over it that didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So it's not really ever a good idea because they half-ass it, but I didn't care. Chief Elsie at the time was at Southeast. She was incredible, and she pushed it, and she liked going into the CompStat with these numbers, and what we were finding is basically the same offender kept hitting the same area, because they're very territorial.
Showing that mesh relationship or that nexus.
Well, then it even went further. Is once I made a digital hookbook up for the dope dealers, we saw 30% of the drug dealers we were targeting were also habitual burglars in the same division. So if they're dealing dope together, more than likely they're stealing shit together too, right? And the reason something that inspired me to come up with that is there was an officer here now. He went to the DEA. His name is Mark Terry. And Misty and Greg remembering. When I got on, he was the dope chaser. He was so instinctive. His instincts were incredible. He was intuitive as far as visualizing what a dope dealer would do, right? And I really was somebody that I wanted to kind of be like and model my instincts after. But he also had a book in his shirt pocket. It was his hook book basically, and he had a little intel book on. He could tell you this bad guy's nickname was hell Pookie, and he dealt dope over at Robin Oaks. He drove a Oldsmobile. He hung out with these other guys. He had all this in his little book, right? Well, who had access to that? But just him. And there was always a running joke within the little unit, like if he ever, God forbid, got killed in the line of duty, we were going to pilfer his pocket. Yeah, we're going to pilfer his shit and take it, and we would have that that little treasure trove. So I wanted to make a digital hook book that was accessible to everybody and targeted certain vendors, and that's how it kind of got started. But it was inspired by what he was doing back in the early 90s. So, and as far as like the brass goes, it just seems like I'm always getting called by somebody. Even now, I mean, even to this day, at all levels of command, it just, I don't know. I always stumble into something where and it's prideful, but it's also stressful in a lot of ways of coming up with an answer. And a lot of people that this, I like y'all know I like projects, and there's always a more efficient way to do anything, right? And I hate the phrase, and Steve Claggett said this too, and I was over there. If I had a lighter, I would light it when Steve said this. He hated the old, this is the way we've always done it mentality. Yes. It pisses me off when I hear that, because it impedes progress, right? And I don't know. I don't think that way. I always try to look at a certain task or a certain program and see if it's being run the most efficient way, and then how could it be done better? Everything can be done better, right? It may fail. You may, oh shit, I didn't do that right. I'll tweak it here and there, which I've done. But over the years, it's gotten the trust of some brass, and I am comfortable talking to them because I don't speak on things unless I know something about them. I'm not just somebody just sit and run my mouth about everything, because there's plenty of those people in the department. And I also am not one of these people that would sit and talk about a program and say, oh, that ain't going to work. Well, this is never going to fail. Okay, well, how you fix it? Well, I don't know. That's not my job.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I can't stand is people who automatically say no, or well, that's not going to work, or that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that they just, especially some command level folks, they hear a new program and they immediately just say no, as opposed to, let's fucking make this work. And then when I came into the whole tabs thing, Chief Elsie said, do it, push through it, make it happen, lay it out, and let me see it. And I did. And it kind of went from there and went on to Chief Coleman, and then I kind of had that relationship with him. And hell, now most of the chiefs now I've known since they were POs.
I want to touch on tabs just real quick, because I did help you a little bit when you had that going. The history of a hook book isn't all that new, but like you said, the important part there was that you had a hook book that could be shared across. We were actually sharing information. Which to me at the time, that had never been done before. And I believe, didn't you get an award for that? Wasn't that recognized in some way?
Wasn't it hanging in a banner by his cubicle?
No,
I think so.
Oh,
no, that's a different award for that. No, I did get an award for that. I was
Where's your ring?
the ring's left at home. Patrol Officer of the Year in 2010. For that, I mean, yeah. So that was a nice thank you from Chief
What year?
2010.
Yeah,
it was. I got it right before
before?
I came. Yeah, right before I came over to the team.
I can't imagine supervising you.
Oh yeah.
Did you work for Sergeant Grant probably the longest?
Yeah, I worked for the Grant brothers. There was Robert and there's Ron Grant, and they're identical twins. And both
Ron
of them
looks like the Terminator.
Yes,
Well, the Terminator from Terminator 2, like the police officer with everything tucked in so
Right.
tight.
Oh yeah, and his hair.
That's how you tell them apart.
There's not a hair out of place, and he's very.
I remember seeing him
meticulous.
run for the first time through the parking
He's
lot.
robotic.
Yeah, robotic. He looked like the Terminator.
He definitely didn't look like Arnold. That's for
No,
sure.
he didn't look like Arnold, but these guys, both these two twin brothers, one of them very manicured, and the other one somewhat disheveled, and that's Robert. He looked like he had just went out on a bender, But
He had the suave hair kind of in his face that he had to move aside.
Yeah,
little bit.
he did not use a lot of gel. Like Ron shit was like, it was like a
in place.
Jimmy Johnson hair, like always in place, and he was very even deliberate, even how he put Carmex on his lips. I know I saw him back there doing that. It was like kind of creepy. But I worked for Ron before I worked for Robert, and they were the best. Just generally good people. Because honestly, who gives a shit about being a good cop? I mean, really, being a good cop, that's a bonus. But generally good people.
Which translates to really great supervisors, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I asked him.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God. What did he say?
He didn't mention
Indeed.
all the penis memes or
I don't know anything about those.
get caught pictures with, eating a banana.
Eating a banana,
He didn't mention
yeah.
those things, which I was hoping he would.
Of course not.
But here's what he said. Joe is a great officer to have work for you because he will do the job the right way. If we had some type of crime problem, he would always come up with a way to solve the problem. His passion was shutting down drug houses and drug dealers at Southeast, and all of the drug dealers knew who he was, and they didn't want to get on his bad list. Officers from other divisions and departments would call him if they were looking for a suspect and thought he could help locate him. What made him exceptional was he was always kept up with the new laws and always followed the Supreme Court decisions. He even developed programs to help officers track suspects. Joe always gives 110%, whether it's work, working out, or family life.
Wow. I like how you changed your voice to sound like him, too.
I was trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Sergeant Grant.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarge. Love you. Miss you. The best guys I've ever worked for.
Let me piggyback on that real quick. What he said there about case law. For those that don't really know about police work, I'd like for you to kind of explain that because you talk about the generations of police work. When you were working with Klingel and those guys, and they kind of taught you how to do it, and then you guys went out and you did your thing, and then you kind of taught us when I came over to CRT. That's one of the biggest things I ever learned from you was case law, and you really got me into looking at case law, what it does, how it kind of guides us for what we do, and just how, for lack of a better word, ignorant some people are in this department that do this every day that have no idea what case law says that we can and can't do.
And I'll add to that real quick that I would say also the follow through that you pushed with being an officer. When you make an arrest, it doesn't end when you drop them off at jail, but it's the report writing and what you're putting in there, and then going to trial and getting on the stand, and how you can articulate yourself, how you can defend your actions, how you present yourself. That was huge for me in my career because no one ever really pushed that. And then now I'm getting exposed to a lot of this. I'm getting practice. I'm getting guidance from you. And then I'm putting it into practice. Actually, we went to court. I don't know. We were in court every week at least. We go to court first in the morning and get it knocked out, and then turn around
hit a house
and maybe
Right.
and then maybe grab a lunch
Right
while
back
I'm
to
right,
jail.
and then just start booting doors again right that afternoon. And it was just a revolving door of arrest turning into court time. And I'd say that was huge for me, was how you helped us with report writing and court time.
So there was we talked about me being on the brass good list, and that shit can change on a dime too. You can get on a shit list really quick. Way back when, there was a certain chief, I'm not going to mention their name, that actually assigned their sergeant, the admit sergeant, to review all of my police reports. And another sergeant basically told me this, that, hey, you don't really care if I said, hey, you look all you want. But that person made me study law more and also be more articulate and document what I was doing. I said, you know what, I'm going to make my damn report so defined that the person reading this, their head's going to melt, their brain's going to melt trying to decipher this. I would actually put some excerpts from case laws, and Sarge Garcia down there in narcotics, he's read many of these, working alongside of me. And then also my reports changed drastically from when I started until when I left the streets. But it was really important because there's a lot of people, they take somebody to jail and they take it up to the jail sergeant and they get it approved by the jail sergeant. They may or may not be even close to an expert on that particular topic. And they think that their case ends there. Oh, I got it past them. It's a great arrest. No, I tried to prepare my reports and my cases, and the people that I worked with, we prepare our cases for courts, not for a jail sergeant, right? That, like I said, may or may not be an expert on that particular arrest. And it was just really important to and know the updated laws. Know when Kentucky versus King came out, or Arizona versus Gant come out, how that affected us. And anybody listening, young officers, caselawforcops.net, well, there's a caselawforcops.net. It's great for knowing all the new laws and all the, basically it has a synopsis of the case, the ruling on it, and how it affects you. And I think that's really important as an young and old officer, because if you're just one of these young officers that learn basic search and seizure from the academy, and you think you're going to roll through 2 decades of doing that type of work and it's going to carry you, you're sorely mistaken. I think a lot of the officers now, they don't educate themselves in certain laws, so they try to make certain scenarios fit into laws they know, when in fact they actually could articulate it better and it would fit better and they wouldn't get in trouble. So that was always just important to keep myself and other people who worked with me out of trouble.
Yeah, and all of this kind of going along with how the command staff looked at you, just for listeners to understand, you are a police officer rank.
Yes.
Okay, so the police officer rank, I don't want to say it's an entry rank, but is the first rank you come on as the department. And then from there, most jobs require that you promote to senior corporal in order to transfer to another division or get another job. And then you can work your way up the ranks from there if you choose. You are still a PO, or what we call a police officer.
Missy calls slick sleeve.
Yeah, it's
Or a slick
sleeve.
sleeve. It's slick sleeve because there's no chevrons on the sleeve.
No.
You never let that rank define your work. And I remember you talking about that a lot. You look at other detectives or other senior corporals on the department and you even say, look, they're not even doing this much that they can do, and don't let that rank define the box of the work you can put into this job.
Yeah, I always believe don't let that rank restrain you and allow progression, right? You don't have to be a detective to do the detective type work out in the street. Look at all the cases that we put together with the Walker crew and all those other ones we put together.
You're working with federal agencies, working with Texas DPS.
That we started cases from reasonable suspicion and built it up to federal level conspiracy type cases, all from a band of yahoos in uniform. You don't have to have, of course, you get to a certain point, you have to bring it to a
Other
detective
resources.
on a silver platter or get other resources in, but you don't have to let your rank or even your status and wherever you work hold you back. And I still don't let my slick sleeveness hold me back. I have no problems making decisions and building on those, and I really don't at this shit. I think I'm like 50 something at my, or 49 or 50 at my rank right now in the department, and I'm fine.
So, one of the sayings you always had that almost sounded like a dead horse being beaten to me besides the electric boogaloo.
Yeah,
was
breaking to electric boogaloo is your kryptonite.
So the other thing that I always heard you say is your reputation is not what you think of yourself, it's what others think of you. And I always remember you'd say that, and I kind of I know. Well, and it's like, well, obviously, right? Obviously, you know this. But one day you said it, and it just hit me a different way, and it made me realize that it doesn't matter how good of work I do here. It can be the best work.
Yeah.
That doesn't even necessarily make my reputation. All that makes my reputation is what others think of me.
Of course.
And that kind of showed me something else amongst the good police work was also the camaraderie with not just their small units, but working with others from other divisions, networking, having good relationships with other police officers.
And I that's one thing I would tell all young officers. Your reputation starts very, very early in your career. You can be looked at as a hard worker but not controlled, right? Or a slug, or a lazy asshole, or a squirrel, as we like to call people, or somebody that's not trustworthy, or just somebody that just shouldn't be doing this job. And once you get a reputation like that, it's really, especially a negative one, it's really hard to shake it, right? If you have a good reputation, you really want your reputation to walk in the door before you do, right? You want your name, and hopefully it's in a good light, to walk in that door before you go in there for a job interview. Because there's a lot of people that they do really good work, but they're hard to get along with, right? People don't like them. And a lot of this job, when you go apply for some of these units, go, yeah, he does good work, but God, he's an asshole. He's hard to work with. He continually loves to rock the boat and let everybody know he's the smartest man in the world. He can't bend and get along with people. You know, and I think that's really important. You're not everybody lives in your world, right? You can be very good at something, but you need to be open-minded and know there's 1,000 ways to do a job, right? And also be flexible to change it, right? But I think that's one of the most important things, your reputation. And bad ones are really hard to shake here on this department.
Yeah.
I think this job can be cynical too.
Yes.
And it's lonely when you're good at something. I'm sure you know that, but you know it too. Because when Danny applied for SWAT, there was some rumors that he was cocky. Mm-hmm. Well, I went and found out for myself. He's not cocky. He's confident. And he's surgical. And he has superior concentration. So I think a lot of people were maybe jealous or inferior. Because I can't think of any other person I want coming in on a hostage rescue than someone that has those characteristics. So this job can be cynical, and when you are good at something, and you've been good at a lot of things, you're going to have some naysayers. How have you dealt with that?
I consider the source. When I went to that CRT, I kind of did my little background on that team too. And I heard, Danny Canetti, he's just a cocky fuck. All right, I got something for him. Right, I get over and start working. Start working with this.
Suddenly changed.
Yeah.
It just got very tense.
I thought this was the joking.
Very tense in here right now.
I started working with Danny. I'm going, this guy's good. This guy's damn good. He's smart. He's tactically sound. He listens. He's willing to change. And I started saying no. And then I started listening to the people that said it initially. And I go, all right, there you go. They don't have anything good to say about anybody. So when I hear people talking shit about me, and I've heard people talking shit about this podcast, right?
Yeah.
But I consider the source, and they know who they are, and they had never done shit, and they're not liked by anybody, and they could sit over there in their corner and complain. But I'm proud that I got a lot of good friends. And like if anybody in this room right now was to say something, I would listen to them, right? I would if y'all had advice to me, even if it was pulling me to a side and say, hey, you need to knock this shit off. You need to be better at this. You need to don't be such a jerk. I would listen. Now other people, like, you can go cram that. That's how I've dealt with it, Misty. Is basically I consider who's actually saying it.
So moving on from there.
Moving on from Danny.
Yeah.
Danny doesn't like attention. He's bearded away. He's steering the boat.
Mark and I leave the CRT team, regretfully, actually. I think, Mark, what was your reason for leaving?
Honestly, when I was looking at my career, I really wanted to go to narcotics. Just always did. And finally had that opportunity to go. So I went, and I'll tell you that a lot of me does regret it. I wish that we still were together. I really do, because I've been doing this job for a long time over a few different departments, and I can tell you that that's easily the most fun that I've ever had in my career. It's not even close, and I really wish we could go back to doing that. But that's the biggest reason I left, and I regret it every day.
Yeah, I knew when I left, I said these will likely be the best years on the department I've had, and so far it's still been that way. But Mark and I basically abandoned you. So once again, you're without friends, kind of.
Yeah, I'm without friends. And
so you moved to South Central?
Yeah.
And did South Central CRT?
Yeah, I did. I went and worked for now Chief Foy. He was a sergeant over at South Central CRT. And hell, I had done almost 19 years at Southeast. And I was really on the verge of getting burned out. And there was also a new chief and a major, our major that took over the CRT, and a lieutenant, actually. He's not with the department. Neither one of them are around anymore. I'm not going to mention the names because they're not worth mentioning. But I saw them come in and heard their ideas and like, all right, I think I'm gonna time for a change. In South Central, I worked Oak Cliff a lot before it became South Central. Greg and I, there was a part of the group that mainly liked to hang in South Dallas. South Dallas was like, shit. It's,
Got tired of Zombieland?
Yeah, I got tired of Zombieland. But Oak Cliff was more of a cross between South Dallas and also Pleasant Grove,
Yeah,
right?
a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah, and you also ran a lot more stash houses down there too. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go to South Central and I'm going to work for Foy, and it mainly was because the command staff at Southeast was changing, and plus there were some people left on the team that I was tired of the role. I was tired of that role, and I ended up going to work with a bunch of other complete strangers, at Southeast. Some people I vaguely heard of or never heard of, and worked with them. But I knew Foy, and I trusted Foy and his vision and his leadership style. And I ended up working there my last year before I went to legal.
So you had Chief Foy on, and he kind of touched on it. I guess you were working for him when 7/7 happened.
Yes.
So for those who may not be familiar with 7/7, it's what the Dallas Police Department refers to as July 7th, 2016, when we had the incident of 5 officers killed downtown during a Black Lives Matter protest. Sometimes the news refers to it as a sniper attack or event. But it's interesting how that event definitely impacted every single person on the department, whether they were there that night or not, and no matter what level of involvement they've had. So you were on the South Central CRT when 7/7 happened. And I'm going to maybe jump ahead a little bit and just kind of preface or set context for this, and that the first 3 officers who were shot on 7/7 happened to be Southeast officers at one point. So we knew all 3 of them.
Yeah.
One of them specifically was someone I knew and also looked up to when I was a rookie at Southeast, and happened to be a very good friend of yours. So maybe you can share with us what it was like that day leading up to the events of finding out about this going down, where you were. And I don't know if you need to also explain a little bit about who this friend was to you.
That day, I remember on the South Central CRT, we ended up getting into 2 houses that day. And it was a long day. We ended up working a little bit of overtime that day. And it was an exhausting day. It was just balls hot in the sun. It was just so hot in the summer,
It's
right?
like 106 that day.
Yes.
Yep.
And going home and relaxing. I remember my daughter and then wife at the time were out of town, and so I was home alone. I was watching a movie late at night, and I started getting. So I didn't have the news on, obviously. So I started just getting constant texts and phone calls, and I was like, "Holy shit!" So I turned off the movie and I started watching the news and just watching everything unfold. And there was so much misinformation going on. There was only 1 down, there was 10 down, there was this one officer had passed away. No, he's still alive. No, he's passed away. No, he's still alive. And there were so many turns that night took. And seeing the videos of Brent Thompson, that was actually on a live feed of him getting gunned down there in front
Still
of El
on
Centro.
YouTube even.
Yeah, it's terrible. That's one of the worst videos I've seen in law enforcement. But Greg was also friends with one of the fallen, and so after that happened, I was already towards the end of my career. I was very burnt out. Even going over to work at South Central, I still was just tired. We were making very good arrests, and it was still fun, but it wasn't as fun as it used to be, right? It was more like a job as opposed to enjoyment, right? And also things were changing, just the command staff and just the political culture was changing, and the outlook on law enforcement was changing to the point where you really felt like what you were doing was like pissing in the wind, and you weren't appreciated, and there were some ungrateful people. I was already to that point, that mindset, and then that happened, and I had at the time Charmin was 2, a little over 2 years old. Yeah, my daughter Carmen, and I've heard for years, when you get a child, it's going to change your mentality. Oh, the hell with that, it will not. Well, it did, and then when that happened, and losing officers like that, and just a lot like how finite life can be, and just losing. Dramatic pause. Losing such a good friend, and almost invincible character like that, like any of us can go, you know? And I was like, maybe it's time for a change. Finally, set aside selfishness of wanting to be the guy to go out and hit this drug house. Because let's make no mistake, listeners, we can knock out 10 dope houses in a week. There's 50 more taking their places. And Mark, sorry, you being in narcotics, and
Same 10 pop up and again. Anyway,
they do that. Yeah, they pop up, but we did it more just for the rush and also for completing the task. Right? It's a mission. When you go out and you're investigating a house and you're attacking a house, it's to complete the mission. But you look at when that happened, it kind of woke me up of like, what am I doing? Why am I still doing this type of work? So that next week, Chief Foy talked about doing 13 events in 5 days and all the funerals and all the events and the candlelight vigils and all of that. It all just, God, that week was, for me personally and professionally, the worst, right? And I know so many people lost so many things that day, and they're still affected. Everybody here in this room is affected. So I'm just giving you what my perspective was and how it affected me. I was one of the pallbearers, and so was Greg down there. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And I started thinking, I'm going out and we're shutting down some of these houses. To what cost?
Yeah.
So I decided, I remember legal services popped up. I had been on 20-something years. I didn't know what legal did. But I knew because I'd never promoted. That's one of the things that I wish I could go back and change is promoting, right? To senior corporal only. I wouldn't want to be a supervisor. I wouldn't want that role. But only because it limited where I could go. And they had a spot open for PO, and they called it warrant services and legal. And, all right, that sounds kind of cool.
Really?
Little did I know. I applied for legal. I ended up getting it. And the last door I kicked in was September of 2016 at 3823 Bonneview.
I'm glad you remember.
Right.
I do. It was a shitty apartment down there, and basically it was a lady that kept pleading with Chief Foy for us to shut down this network of guys. There was like 6 different rooms, all connected, and we ended up getting into the main one. It's like sometimes you just have a key to the city, right? And you just stumble into shit. I remember kicking that door and 2 guys behind it, both trying to hold it back, shoving them aside because the floor's slick and they're sliding on the floor. One guy's crawling out the back window, and there's one of them dropped a pistol. There's like a few pounds of weed behind the door, and then there's a bunch of crack and Xanax, and got everything settled. And I remember going to jail, and I was thinking, why am I still doing this? That person that kept calling repeatedly about us shutting down that house. If I go out there and risk, do that style of proactive policing, I get into something that may be perceived as wrong or pushing the envelope. That same person that's begging for help that actually has to live amongst that shit probably would be out, and I would be vilified. So that was really a turning point of like, I just want to change. I've never had an office job in my life. But I knew I could. It's easy for me to say, "Oh, I'm not going to mess with dope. I'm not going to chase dope anymore. I'll just answer calls." I knew I had to take myself. I had to remove myself from the streets if I was going to change. Right? I could not, because I know if I said, "I'm not going to be on the team," I'll go back to patrol, answer calls, which I could have easily done. I had great seniority, had days and weekends off. I know myself. I would have gone back some form to that type of job, and I would not have stopped. So I applied for legal services, and that was a huge learning change. And I didn't know anything about case filing. I didn't know anything about RMS and this new thing called LEA Portal, which is the county's version of RMS, how we file cases. I had to learn all that very quickly, and it wasn't fun. My job is not fun, but it does occupy my mind a lot. because I found a shitload of problems that needed to be fixed. And I do like projects, and I like solving problems.
To that end, when I found out you were going to go to legal, I was ecstatic for a couple of reasons. I was happy, first of all, that you were getting out of patrol, because, to be honest with you, when I left and you went over to South Central, you were telling me about some of the issues you had. I was worried about you. I really was. And then my best friend was coming up to legal. I was like, this is awesome. And then the second reason, a little more selfish, is the guy you replaced was a really good guy in legal. He was kind of the go-to up there. And for those that don't know, this division we're talking about, legal, is kind of the clearinghouse for every arrest, every piece of paper that goes over to the county. Legal is involved in that. Yeah, so it has to be done right. And so for you to replace him, I couldn't have really, in reality, I could not have dreamed of anybody better to come up to replace him.
Well, Mark, I was such a fish out of water going up there, though. I didn't know anything that office did. And I appreciate you saying that. And the guy that I replaced had been there 17 years, and he had everything. He was like, looked at it, the department was like Yoda, right? As far as, but man, I got up there, and once I learned the basics, I started looking around and lifting up this rug. There's a piece of shit laying there. I looked over this other rug. There's another turd. There's another rug. This one looks like it's been there for years, dried up, lost its color. And I was like, damn, this is a mess. So my over-analytical mind started working, and actually it put me at ease a little bit, taking that type of job of thinking I could help change something. And we're still doing that.
And once again, you are the guy.
The go-to.
Yeah, the go-to at everyone in that area of the department, and the command staff is looking to for help. Like, oh, can you help us clean this up? And asking your advice, and basically being some kind of liaison for all these programs. So you have legal. Misty talked about projects. You are someone who likes projects. So you had some other things going on in the department, like the Angel Armor, grant money, working with the Dickey's Foundation, now this ATO podcast. Any of those you want to touch on?
Yeah, so the Angel Armor, in 2016, August of 2016, Angel Armor came out to South Central, and they had all these plates, and they basically would stop ballistic round. They were also very lightweight, and they could fit in your level 3 vest, and to give you further protection. I ended up buying my own. I got with Minnie and Bill Caruth, who said, hey, we want to do something to get all officers this kind of protection. So they hooked me up with a couple of other people. It fell through, and then in December of 2016, they introduced me to Maureen Dickey of Dickey Barbecue, and it kind of took off. We started raising funds and for Angel Armor plates, and we ended up getting, first was Gang Unit, and then Northeast CRT and Northeast Deployment got theirs, and then some Patrol Northeast, because World Market, our Central Market actually was the donors for that one. And we started having all these fundraisers, and then I got a chief involved because I was getting a lot of resistance from another command staff that was lower than that particular chief, and I always know to go higher. I try to swing for the fences, and I have no problem going over people's head when I think that the cause is just. And I felt the cause was just of getting officers protection, right? And I didn't give a shit who I pissed off. So I go to this other, at the time, 2-star chief, and got the ball rolling, and there was a grant written, and the governor at the time basically said they're going to open up for grants. I literally had, we long story short, got everybody outfitted with Angel Armor on the department.
So how many Angel Armor plate sets do you think are out there right now for officers on Dallas Police?
Sets, probably.
Yeah, or how many officers do you think are outfitted? Just ballparking.
Probably to over 2,000.
Nice.
Yeah. So, no, that was a good project. And then also it formed a relationship with the Dickey's Barbecue and Maureen Dickey, and now I'm on the Dickey Foundation board. I don't know how I worm my way into that, but it's an honor to be on that. I'm also Ed Lujan asked me if I would be on the Assist the Officer Foundation board, and I've always, totally respected and grateful for the Assist the Officer Foundation. And then Ed asked me, and I remember, I'll think about it. I kind of gave the it's like getting invited to a party, and deep down you're not going to go, and right, and
Doritos and underwear night instead. Go out.
I'd rather sit there and watch something on Netflix. But Randy Aguilar, he basically goes, no, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Like, oh, shit, okay. I just don't like to be a part of something I don't feel like I'd add anything to, right? But, I've had a lot of fun. I got to spend more time with Randy doing it, and also just, helping a lot of officers doing what the ATO does, like when injured officers or they have sickness or some kind of ailment, we will provide financial assistance, and it's been fun. There's a lot of events we put together for fundraising. We're a nonprofit, and then starting up this podcast was kind of just another way to feel like I was chipping in, and plus it was a big project to start. I didn't know what the hell I was doing starting this. I still don't. I'm still fumbling my way through this.
Yeah, we're all figuring it out.
Yes.
So with all these projects, for me, you've always been the project guy. Like, you've been good at starting projects. You have these great ideas, and then you also incorporate them almost, and you get others involved, and you make it a team effort. So your latest project really is this podcast. So talk to us about the podcast. What made you start it? What was the idea for it? Where do you see this going? And I'm talking about this podcast. The ATO,
this one. Oh,
Bridging
okay.
the Divide podcast.
Not the other one I have going
your
on.
secret personal one. Yeah.
I'm not talking about that one yet.
Right.
I don't always have great ideas. I have ideas, but if you only know about the decent ones because it's the only ones I bring up. The others I keep in my head. So Betsy Orton of the Dickey Foundation, they have their podcast, Dickey's Doing Good, and she urged me, you should do one for the ATO. I've never done anything like that, and I was not that comfortable even talking on theirs because I'm not used to it. She planted that seed, and I just kind of blew it off, and then I went to Dr. T's 3-day seminar up in Frisco for the first training, the peer support training. And they had a panel of 10 first responders, a combination of police and fire, from agencies across the state. And they all had critical incidents and talked about about injury, a physical injury, and also mental injury from these incidents, and then the recovery after. And she only gave each of them 10 minutes to talk about it. And as I was sitting there listening, I was looking around at the room of how engaged all these other first responders were from all over the Metroplex, from Grand Prairie to Salina to Garland PD, Flower Mound. They were all there, and nobody was looking at their phone. Everybody was engaged, staring at these first responders tell their stories. And I was thinking, this right here could be a podcast. Well, I talked to Ed Lujan. He's our ATO chair, and he just said, good, go with it. I trust you. Just do it. Make it happen. Then I was like, well, shit. I don't know if I can do this by myself. I don't know what I'm doing. So, one thing I will credit myself on is I like to surround myself with intelligent people and people that can help make shit happen. So that's why I reach out to Misty, to Danny, Josh, to work together on this. So that was like in June of 2021. I remember sitting at the pool with a notepad, brainstorming ideas for the name. You gotta come up with a name. You gotta come up with a mission, right?
So what was that mission, I guess, or your idea, the direct idea? This podcast is supposed to be for what?
I wanted to give the first responder community a platform and a stage to tell their story of critical incidents, and also take a therapeutic approach to talking about it. Just talking about it. There might be 10 other first responders or civilians that hear the story that may be struggling, and they may take 2 out of the 10 may take something from that story of how they dealt with their incident, and that may help somebody. And ATO, that's what the foundation's for, is helping first responders. But also, I saw a need to, no pun intended, bridge divides between first responder, especially law enforcement, and communities. Because I've got a lot of civilian friends that listen to this, and they reach out and they don't understand the culture. I think that this podcast can not only help other first responders, but also help people outside of our culture understand this better and recognize what we go through and see that this shit's real. It's not something you watch on TV. These are actually real people going through these incidents, and they have to physically and mentally recover. And some people, years, for the rest of their life, they're never recovered from it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I had to come up with a name. Not a lot of people know this. The first name that I was pretty much sold on was ATO in the Uphill Battle. I even had graphics made. That was going to be the name of this podcast. And then I was talking to some people, and they said, "Nah, does that really suit your mission as far as what you're trying to accomplish with, bridging a gap with the community?"
Something positive out of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Rather than constant struggle and
Right.
negativity. Yeah.
Right. Constant struggle and negativity, and just, and yes, it is an uphill battle, but also you can't take you can't look at everything in a negative light. Otherwise, it would consume you, right? There's got to be some positivity in what you're trying to do. So I settled on ATO, Bridging the Divide. And Danny, you're the only guy that I know that is incredible with sound, understands it, and I know how meticulous you are with everything you do. I reached out to you, asked you to do it, and I remember when I first asked you, it was only going to be temporary until I find somebody else. Well, here you are, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you.
Well, and real quick, I want to interject on that then. So I want to point out to everyone that the ATO is a nonprofit organization.
Yes.
And everyone here is volunteering their time. So no one's getting paid for any of this. Misty, Josh, you, even the other people on the sidelines when they do stuff, Randy, it's all volunteer.
Even running all the social medias. I mean, there's all these little things that you had to do, and I get Misty came on after her story, and after all the feedback I got from the great,
Stop it.
fantastic Misty Van Kuren, I was like, I need to get her ass on here. I need to get her on here to bring some intelligence to the podcast.
Some art.
Right.
Yes, and
creativity,
you listen
some
to her openings, and you can hear that. But I try to surround myself with good people, good friends, and people I care about. And I think by doing that, it's going to make this be successful. And there's been times that I kind of wanted to walk away, and Randy's kind of
Already?
Well, before it got going, I was frustrated with a lot of things.
Right.
There was a lot of little things that were roadblocks that some people, I'm not going to mention names, were putting up to try to negativity, being pessimistic about things. I don't like that. You can, if I have no room for negative and pessimistic people, okay, I'll cut them out of it. So I got urged by several people, y'all included, to push forward. I had to figure out how to stream the shit and how to get it to all these other streaming platforms, which I'm not that smart of a person. So really I had to do a lot of research. So I knew from the get-go Ed Lujan was going to be our first, right? Because his story was, I heard it in Dr. T's training, and it was just amazing, and it needed to be heard. And then I had no idea who else we were going to get. As far as and what theme I wanted it to be a huge variety of guests. I don't want to just have a bunch of crazy SWAT stories or narcotic stories or shootout stories. I want to have a personal side too. I want to have organizations and professionals that work alongside with law enforcement, like EMTs. I want to have doctors on. I want to have defense attorneys, prosecutors on, judges. I want to have a variety of people on that in the community, law enforcement and first responders, there's a connection to everybody, right? And I think that that's a way we can bridge divides and help people. If we can understand each other, I think that's where you're going to find the positivity with a project like this, and it is a big project. There's a lot of little things. Starting up social medias from scratch, buying an actual website for the deal. There was a lot of little things. Finding the right equipment. If people listen to the first episodes to the ones we do now, you can tell we have different mics, and Danny, I know you makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, easier than the pawn shop mics, I guess. Where are we at?
Yeah, we had cans. We were just talking in Campbell soup cans.
Snap
Yeah,
to replace the mics.
yeah, we had Campbell soup cans for an echo effect, and we had just our iPhone mics. We were recording shit. But that's how it started. And where do I want it to go? I don't know, really. I don't know how long this will go. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm staying connected with my true friends. And I'm meeting a lot of interesting people. I'm not going to just I'm having a lot of my friends on because a lot of my friends are badasses and they got badass stories, right? But I'm going to have on I've already met a lot of interesting people that I've never met. And I want to continue to do that. And I'm hoping that it will touch not just the first responder community, but also civilians. And I believe it has. I can't tell you how many messages and text messages or emails that I've received from people from across the country, strangers. I don't even know. I've got a female officer in West Virginia messaging me asking about what books Misty read to get in the warrior's mindset. And I'm responding to them. Several people have reached out saying, there's one officer, I'm not going to mention his name, and I'm not going to be as descriptive about what he said, but basically was struggling and on the fence about seeking out help, and he heard some episodes, and that very next week he reached out to a therapist. I think that's what it's about. That's what if you help one person with a project like this, it's worth it. That's what I want to continue to do. I want to continue to grow. I want it to get better, but we've done very well so far in a very short amount of time, and I just think we should just keep doing what we're doing, and I'm going to do it as long as I can, and I feel it's productive.
Nice. Yeah, and I think it's been rewarding for us as well to see areas that we didn't think about affecting. You think about the families of these first responders, and it's something for them to hear their loved one get on and tell their side of the story in a different way than maybe they're used to hearing, because maybe their family member just doesn't talk that way at home about their incidents or what's going on in their head or their mind. And it's also some recognition there, and I think the families have also been vocal about how they appreciate this as well.
It's therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's really hard sometimes to sit here next to somebody, across from somebody that has gone through something so god awful, and absorb it like almost you're a therapist, and see the pain and see their emotion and watch their physical reaction to when they're talking about their critical incident or an injury they had. You can see that many years later that it's actually still raw.
Yeah, physically affecting people.
Oh, you see the handshake, you see the eyes widen, you see the tears come up. It's really, we'll go from laughing on this podcast to people breaking down and us having to take breaks. It's hard. That's hard to do, but I've had people reach out and say, thank you for this. It was actually therapeutic. My family has heard this story in a different way. They didn't even know all the facts, and now they do. Now they understand it. So that's what it's about. And as long as y'all keep carrying me on this, I'll keep doing it.
We'll do our best.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
The job in legal, you still have that? You're
Yes,
still at legal.
I'm still full-time in legal.
Yeah, and I know I've seen you around a bunch training a lot of the investigators on how to use the system and do this legal part correctly. I would say you have the most contact with the department now as compared to most officers, just because you get around dealing with these officers. There's obviously a generational difference in the cops we have now versus when we had back then. What's your view on what are those differences, and good or bad? And if there is something bad, what's the advice to officers these days?
Well, thanks for letting the listeners know that I get around. I appreciate it.
Any regrets?
Yeah. No regrets.
Not to mention with the county too. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
DA's office.
There's so many different investigative units, from robbery to the substation has their property crime detectives to people in narcotics that I've had to train in, homicide, gang, vice. I've had to train just about every detective on the department in this case filing procedures, and I'm still doing it. I had to make up manuals and all these different these go-bys for people. When I first started it, I did not know the systems. I had to learn them, and then I did an analysis of the problems that I found, and I made a manual that addressed those. And you wouldn't believe the resistance I got from especially the old detectives. And it goes back to the old shitty saying, this is the way we've always done it. I go, yeah, well, I'm finding you're screwing this up. I found a shitload of cases that are screwed up because of the way you've always done it. So there's a big problem. And now, though, you know, and you got Detective Green sitting down there. She knows, she worked in legal for a stint. She's seen the problems as a whole for the department. And now you got detectives that are coming on, and you're breaking that mindset of the way we've always done it. And they're just kind of like, well, this is how we got to do it now. And you know what? In 5 years, we may look back and say, damn, Joe screwed that up. That he really messed that up, and this could be done better. And yeah, I know that. There may be things, there's always something lying underneath the water, underneath the surface, that some iceberg that could be sitting there waiting on you. But what I came up with and basically shoved down everybody's throats, I know from the issues that I've identified, this will help. So that's what I just kind of went with. And I've got a lot of friends on the department, and you know, for the most part, people have been accepting. They may go and talk shit, a lot of shit behind my back. I don't know what he's talking about. And then, you know, but that's okay. And I don't, like I said, I always usually consider, again, I consider the source, but it's been difficult starting, but now it's just kind of, now it is the way we're doing it, right? And then a few years, if they try to make changes, well, we've always done it this way. So I'm good with that.
But to go back to your times in uniform, what we talked about a minute ago with how you see beyond just the arrest, right? That's the problem that I see with a lot of investigators is we're so focused on just our case, and we never think about where it goes from here, what happens to this division, what this does, how this works, how this fits in. And that's where your vision has always come in, and you say, hey, I got to educate them on, hey, this just affects more than just your case. This goes a little further than that.
It's taken just a broader look at everything. I mean, I try to look at everything from a bigger picture as opposed to just small-minded thinking. It's like some people drive and they don't look past the hood of their car, right? When we were out there convoying, which I know, Mark, that was one of your favorite things that we did, and Danny too.
I call it the hot roll.
The hot roll. We would go from dope house to dope house to dope house.
4 cars in a line. We just all of a sudden hit the brakes and jump out and
a dead sprint, and the fight's on.
Asses and elbows.
Yep. Yeah. That is turning a corner, like similar to turning a corner in a car, and then looking half block down and seeing the guy walking away from a house that you know is a dope house, right? And working in legal, you look at a bigger picture as opposed to a case goes to from the jail to an investigative unit, and then it goes up to the prosecutors. And if you don't have the finer points, if they're not sharp, once you get on the prosecutor, the case is going to fall apart. And then there's a lot of cases there's some really bad dudes, and there's a lot of cases that they have pending from other offenses that are similar that they've done. So you just don't want them all to fall apart because you did some shoddy half-ass work at the very beginning. I try, and it's really hard sometimes. I try to look at things at a bigger picture approach.
So you plan on staying in legal as far as you know? Nothing else coming up in your mind?
No, as of right now, I'm going to stay. There's nothing else on the department that I honestly, at this age and this time on, I don't want to go and start over somewhere and learn something all new. That would just be too tiresome. And then with the work, which I believe the really important work and fun work with the ATO and the Dickey Foundation, and also this podcast, and I'm working around some really good friends doing this podcast, and that's by design. Put people I respect and care about, in places so we can continue friendships, and also because I know they'll get the job done.
Mm.
The one thing I wish you could do before you left us would be to pass this knowledge you have that you passed to me and Danny and many other people, and keep doing it for the newer generation come out. I heard something interesting the other day. I don't know how true this is, but they say that a generation in police work is 4 years, right? So you think about it, how long have you been out of patrol right now?
Since 2016.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of generations, at least one, come through that have no idea about the things that you taught us, right? I wish we could somehow work that out where you could teach an arrest, search, and seizure class with these new guys coming out and help them out.
Can you teach foot chases and jumping fences?
Right.
Yeah, a lot
in
of that.
Class A's.
Yeah, in Class A's, you're losing half your buttons on going over a fence. I think the proactive style policing is kind of dying in our profession.
Yes.
It's more reactive now than I've ever seen it.
Yes, it's very intelligence based from the FBI. So they drive these models with professors in high towers coming up with these ideas.
Right.
And it's all based on quantifiable numbers rather than really understanding context, which context comes from guys on the ground.
Yes, and that's what we did at Southeast there, especially at the end. We had all the intelligence. We gathered the intel, but then we went out and put it all together. It's like I mentioned that Ronnie Walker crew, at Tiger, and that was really fun. Starting something that low level and there are some of the biggest heroin dealers in that area at the time, and we started that, and basically I had to get DPS narcotics involved, and our narcotics too, and it turned into something really big. But it all started with a bunch of jackasses in uniforms running around, and it was fun. I just don't see that style of policing from that position. And I know I've already preached, don't let your rank or your title hold you back. But I think the way police are kind of looked at right now, and everybody's scared to make a mistake, and I can't say I blame them. I mean, you go out and you want to help people, but you don't want to get in trouble yourself trying to help out a stranger in a neighborhood that you're never going to live in, right? And the only time you would actually even drive through some of these really bad neighborhoods was because you're working and you have a pistol, right? But I don't know. Greg and I came on at a good time where we would start off with rock droppers, and we thought were badass and high five, and we ended up taking down total houses, and that's where you get the big weight and the guns, and then we continued that on the CRT. But then we had such a shift in the perception of policing that we just decided, God, it's not the time for this anymore. And I think the command staff, they want arrests to be made, but I think the mindset of officers right now and that style of policing would be so hard because the risk versus the reward just is not what it used to be, and it's in a lot of ways it's not. I don't think it's as fun as it used to be.
No, probably not. With that being said, I just have one last question for all this then, and that is, looking back at a long career full of stories, tragedies, successes, great relationships, and a lot of personal growth for all of us. Is there anything that you would change along your career timeline if you could go back and redirect it? And is there anything that gray-haired Joe King would tell the younger Joe King, the track athlete?
Yeah. So I would grab that young, cocky 22-year-old Joe by the back of the neck and say, do everything that you did, right? Do it. Just be proud of what you did at work, and be very proud of the friendships that you formed and you've maintained, because there's a lot of people that they can't hang on to a friend, But I would say don't let this job consume you, and don't obsess over the job. Appreciate friends and family more when you're away from the job, right? We're all a retirement away from being forgotten. And I always say that, and I really mean it. It doesn't matter what you've done. And there's a lot of people that sit around, they get pissed off at the department. I'm just going to retire. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go work at Fort Worth. I'm going to go work at Mesquite. Hey, this place has been in business since 1881. This ball keeps bouncing.
That might be the third line I'm always used to you saying.
Hey, it's true though. It's because there's some people that walk away and they think the walls are going to fall in, the seas will roar, and and the skies are going to fall.
They'll miss me.
Yeah, they're going to miss me. Nah, probably not. They're even going to remember you. And sadly, in our job, in this profession, really the only way you're remembered is if you get killed. I mean, really, you got memorials every year that come up, and you get plaques on the wall, and you get portraits on the wall. But it's very sad that somebody can put so long into a career, and you really walk away, and you got a bunch of war stories, and you got a head full of trauma with your friends working, but most of your family is kind of shielded from that, right? And you do kind of become forgotten. It's like starting up this program. Nothing lasts forever, okay? And careers don't last forever. But if you want to leave a legacy behind, try to do it with your friends and family that will be with you past this job. Especially if you to mothers and fathers out there, like your kids are your legacy, right? And now I got Carmen. She's my legacy. So that would be the only thing I would say is appreciate and spend more time with the people, friends and family that are away from the job. But there's not a lot I would change. Maybe, like I said, I would go back and change if I was a senior corporal, become a senior corporal just for movement. But I think it worked out fine for me, and I'm happy with my body of work.
I like that answer. I don't want to steal your line. Do you want to say it? That this is
I think this is a perfect way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank you for all the support. Everybody in this room here, I love them to death. And I can't thank everybody enough for everything. And that's a wrap.
Well, Joe, I just want to say thank you for a few of the best years I've probably had on the department. Thank you for your guidance and your leadership in your own form of fashion. And thank you for continuing our friendship throughout these years. You're someone I've always looked to as a mentor, even after those years on the team. And Misty had a lot of great quotes from a lot of people that were spot on as far as you as not just a cop, but a person. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this podcast, because it's a project you have, and it's been rewarding to work with friends and be a part of this.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, man. I really appreciate the fact that we got so long to work together, and you're easily the best cop I've ever worked with. It's not even close, and an even better friend. And I appreciate you inviting me up here to take part of this. It was awesome.
Would you like to know what your little mini me says about you?
Wow.
Little Princess Carmen.
Sure.
He is the best dad because he takes me to funner places like Kathy's Critters and Kids Empire. And he's very strong.
Those are all very, very accurate points to make.
Love you, Joe.
Love you.
Love you. Thanks for your service.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run. Up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.